They always said they wished you'd just speak up. For months, maybe years. Why are you so quiet? Why won't you just say something? Don't you even care? And then one day, you did. And suddenly they didn't want to hear it anymore. That's the moment we're talking about today. Not the silence, we covered that last time. Today, we're going into what happens on the other side of it. When someone who has been carrying everything quietly for a very long time finally puts it down. Because it doesn't look the way people expect, it doesn't sound the way people expect, and it changes things in ways that most people are completely unprepared for. If you've ever reached that point, or if you're approaching it right now, this video was made for you. And stay until the end, because the last thing I'm going to tell you is the thing nobody warns you about. The dam breaks. Here is what silence actually is at its core. It is pressure, contained pressure, and contained pressure does not disappear. It builds. Psychologist James Pennebaker spent decades studying people who suppress emotional pain, and what he found wasn't just psychological. The body physically changes. Cortisol rises. The immune system weakens. Sleep deteriorates. The longer the silence goes on, the more the body starts to push back. At some point, the container reaches its limit. And when it breaks, it doesn't break the way people imagine. It is not one dramatic confrontation. It is not one single moment of explosion that clears everything. It is more like a shift. Something inside quietly moves from "I will hold this" to "I am done holding this." And once that shift happens, it cannot be undone. The person who goes quiet doesn't become loud overnight, but they become different. And the people around them, the ones who spent years watching that silence, are almost never ready for the person on the other side of it. Because what comes out isn't just words. What comes out is everything they chose not to say. For years, all at once. And it is precise. The precision. This is the part that surprises people most. When someone who has been quiet for a long time finally speaks, they don't ramble, they don't get emotional and lose their train of thought, they don't stumble over their words. They are exact. Because here's what nobody considers. Silence is not empty. Silence is where people process. Every moment they chose not to speak, they were thinking, watching, filing things away, building, without realizing it, a complete and detailed understanding of exactly what happened, exactly when it happened, and exactly what it cost them. Psychologist Dan McAdams studied people who experience prolonged emotional pain construct what he called a narrative identity, a story they tell themselves about what they've been through. And what his research showed is that people who suppress rather than express things tend to build the most precise, the most coherent versions of that story, because they had no one to tell it to. So they told it to themselves, over and over, until every detail was airtight. So when they finally speak, it is not an outburst. It is a closing argument. And that is what is so hard to hear. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the people listening, they don't experience it that way at all. The irony. The people who spent years saying, "Why won't you just talk to me?" When you finally do, they are often the first ones to say, "I can't deal with this right now," or "You're being too much," or "I don't know why you're bringing all of this up now." And if you've ever experienced that, I need you to understand something. That reaction is not proof that you were wrong to speak. It is proof that they never actually wanted to hear you. They wanted the version of you that stayed quiet and kept things comfortable. The silence was never really the problem they wanted solved. It was the solution that worked for them. Psychologist Harriet Lerner, in her research on relationship communication, found something that cuts straight to this. People who push others to open up often have a very specific image of what that opening up should look like. Vulnerable, soft, manageable, not precise, not years of accumulated clarity delivered calmly and without apology. That version, the real version, is the one they call too much. So the person who spent years being told they were too quiet suddenly becomes the person who is told they're too intense. The standard changed. The problem was always you. Except it wasn't. The shift, Here is what actually happens when someone who has been quiet for a long time finally speaks and means it. They stop managing other people's comfort at the expense of their own truth. That sounds simple. It is not simple. For someone who built their entire way of moving through the world around not being a burden, around absorbing, not releasing, choosing to speak is one of the most disorienting things they will ever do. It feels wrong at first. It feels selfish. It feels like breaking a rule they didn't know they'd agreed to follow. But neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on emotional construction shows something important here. The brain does not naturally distinguish between this feels wrong and this is wrong. Discomfort after years of suppression is not a signal to stop. It is the nervous system recalibrating. It is the body learning for the first time what it actually feels like to take up space. That discomfort is not a warning. It is a sign that something is finally moving. And the people who deserve to be in your life, the real ones, will not ask you to stop it. I promised you the thing nobody warns you about. Here it is. When you finally stop being quiet, some relationships will not survive it, not because you said something wrong, but because those relationships were built on a version of you that no longer exists. And that will hurt, even when it's right. Even when it's necessary, it will still hurt in a way that makes you wonder if the silence was easier. It was easier. That's true. Silence is always easier in the short run. But you were never going to stay silent forever. The only question was whether you were going to speak while there was still something left to save or after. The quietest people, when they finally find their voice, don't whisper. They just stop apologizing for the volume. Leave a comment. Did someone in your life tell you to open up and then couldn't handle it when you did? Tell me what happened. I read every single one. Subscribe. New psychology every week. The kind that actually sees you.